They're tracking your face in stores with facial recognition software. They know what you're buying, what you're doing, where you're going. I mean, we're living in a very paranoid situation.
This week's specials with Miles Franklin Precious Metal Investments.
2021 Austrian Philharmonics for only $360 over spot. 2022 Noah's Ark Silver Coins. 1 ounce coins for $375 over spot, and 1/4 ounce coins for $245 over melt.
Call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We have a returning guest today. John Whitehead is the founder of Rutherford Institute. He is a constitutional attorney who has argued cases up to and including the U.S. Supreme Court on behalf of individuals who are suffering at the hands of overreach by government. John, thank you for joining us here again on Liberty and Finance.
Thanks for having me on, sir.
Your recent article, "You'd Better Watch Out. The Surveillance State Has a Naughty List and You're on It," was posted on your Rutherford Institute website. We'll put a link to that that article in the notes for this interview, the description. But we wanted to talk to you about the prevailing increase in surveillance. You've talked to us about the surveillance state several times on previous visits with us, and this is a continuation of the progression and the mounting evidence that is becoming a major factor. It's really impacting people's lives. Just this last week, there was an interview with an Australian senator who was basically incarcerated in what they are calling a quarantine camp. It seems like to resemble a prison or concentration camp. Without consent, they just come and take you, and who's informed that the reason was not because of anything he had done, not because of anything specifically provable of any sense. He had actually was tested for COVID multiple times, always negative, but that a surveillance camera had caught him in close proximity to another person who had later tested positive for COVID. Therefore, he was deemed a close contact and for the good of society needed to be treated as a dangerous thing and therefore locked away until further notice. And he expects to be sent a bill also for like $4,000 for his visit to this camp. So this is just the latest in many, many, many examples of people who we've lost in many regards any shreds of privacy that we have left. But it's not just something theoretical, it's something that's impacting people's their liberty. So can you talk to us about what were the things that drove you to write this article, "You'd Better Watch Out, the Surveillance State Has a Naughty List and You're on It"?
Well, it's something I've been, researching for 10 or 15 years. I saw it started growing, and now it's just everywhere. We're living in a total surveillance state. We're moving into a world surveillance state. Most people do not realize the National Security Agency has 5 bases around the world. They're all connected. They work with 17 different countries around the world. But they work with Google. Google works with the Chinese government. And now I'm having more and more people pointing their finger at me who studied history, the older folks, saying China is on its way to America. What they're saying is we're moving into a social credit type score in this country where everything you're doing is being watched. And the large corporate giants such as Facebook, we ought to talk a bit about the metaverse thing that's coming up. That's a pretty scary thing, I think, for the future. And they're working with the government. Most people don't realize that Amazon, Facebook, and them, Microsoft have billion-dollar contracts with all 17 intelligence agencies to maintain their intelligence cloud. They have access to all that information on us, and the government has access to all the information that all these large corporations have. They work together. In fact, I've been clearly told by former NSA agents who have visited me and read my books and stuff that it's worse than, and they say it's worse than you think, John. I mean, we see your stuff. We just want to, watch out. It's there. It's everywhere, to the point where wherever you walk these days, they're tracking your health status now. Wherever whatever you're doing, they're now come up. This is a pretty far out thing. I was laughing. I noticed it. They're having virus detecting canine squads now. They'll be walking around airports. Supposedly, these dogs are expertly trained to sniff out people who may have COVID. Uh, I have done a lot of research on the dog sniffing with being used as drugs. And major professors across the country now have concluded, after detailed studies of the dogs, they're about 15% accurate on drug sniffing. So the question would be, how much more would they be expert at sniffing out COVID people? What happens, though, when the dog alerts, the police take it as a way to search you without a warrant? And that's the scary thing. But if you see dogs approaching you around the country in the airport, I would not run away, but, avoid police with dogs and things like that, because you could get arrested, possibly taken to jail, or a concentration camp, if you want to call it that, if they start imposing those here. And they already have been built, according to former agents talked to me. $385 million was given to the Halliburton Corporation under George Bush to build the so-called FEMA camps. And the money, according to people who have talked to me, that has been spent. So the camps do exist in this country, and they can be used for the same thing. There's software that's tracking your face wherever you go. I mean, on the streets. We're here. Clearview AI, a corporation, has a software that searches all media, social media websites now, trying to find out what you're saying, what you're doing, how you're moving. That information is, by the way, given over to local police. They have access to it through fusion centers. And most people do not realize there's fusion centers all over this country. They're like large surveillance groupings of military, FBI, the intelligence agencies, and local police, and they're all over the country, and they're watching you travel down the road, where you're going, and trying to determine what you're going to do. And most people say, well, why is the government doing all this? The government's heavily, I would say very paranoid, but heavily into predictive policing now. They want to get the criminal, the extremist, the rebel, before that rebel does something, so they can control society. And I think, like I said, some of the older people I've talked to that have researched this topic saying China is coming, I think they're correct. I think we're moving into that kind of government now. And I mean, you're spending wherever you're spending today, they know exactly what you're buying. They're tracking your face in stores with facial recognition software. They know what you're buying, what you're doing, where you're going. And I mean, we're living in a very paranoid situation. And I think I'm telling people, when you're posting things on the websites, be careful with wording. I mean, Facebook is now, a couple of days ago, was bragging on their new AI algorithms and AI control bots that are now going to be going onto the controlling Facebook and erasing certain words and people and organizations. And what that means is today, the old idea that you could speak your mind and speak out and you'd be allowed to do it and you would have an audience to do it, that's slowly dwindling away as I see it. With this new metaverse thing coming up, which is like a virtual reality system, Facebook, I mean, kids will be wearing glasses, and I mean, you won't know where what you're eating. You can actually get things that help you enhance your eating, virtual concerts, all those things. Virtual, you'll be tossing a ball and it won't be there. That's the kind of system we're moving into today. And it's everything out of the Matrix and those movies that were predicting these things in the great writers of the past. But if George Orwell was around today, he'd be screaming, hey, what happened? Why didn't you people listen to me? And no one's listened. But one thing I do know for sure, the corporate entities have taken over, basically. We live in a very much like a corporate state. And the old idea, Benito Mussolini called it corporatism. The old fascist regimes loved the idea of working with corporations to control people. And so that's what we're seeing today.
The slogan or the saying that you stated about 3 different times about people telling you who are in positions of knowledge of what's really going on that China is coming to the U.S., there have certainly been theories that, people talking about Chinese troops and this sort of thing, but it's much more present and pervasive than that. It's the Chinese system of controlling people through limiting their freedom. There was a saying that was out there about a year ago at the beginning of a lot of the lockdowns that we went through, and that was, where were you, Daddy, when the United States turned into China? So can you talk to us about what people can do if they're wanting to not let our beloved country slip further down this path?
Well, about the only thing you can do to maintain, say, if you want total privacy, I think that's impossible today. Like I say, if you're going to go to the store to shop, Target or Walmart or any of those places, everywhere you go is going to be watched. And on the streets now with license plate readers, most people don't realize that the police have license plate readers up to 1,800 images per minute. And they have a database of billions of license plate images, where we travel, what we do, where we're going. So I think there is some headway that could be made in local communities if local communities would do it. The 10th Amendment, which most people don't know the Bill of Rights, but the 10th Amendment gives local governments the right to push back and say, we're not going to approve of this particular action by the federal government. You can shut down some of the things the police have in your local community. I mean, most people don't realize the police have stingray devices in their cars, the license plate readers, but the stingray devices are small little boxes in police cars. They pull up in front of your home and download everything off your computer and your laptop and your phone. So that's there, and they pull off. This is all done without a warrant. They have an amazing amount of material that the government's given them to do those kind of things. And it's darn scary, the fact that local police have those kind of devices where they can watch, track you where you're moving, go on your social media posts and watch you. And they've been caught doing that across the country. And the FBI has actually helped a lot of police agencies across the country, local police agencies. They trained them, taught them how to do these things. And some FBI agents actually set in local police offices and work with them. But the thing is, they even have our DNA. The FBI has a huge DNA database called the CODIS database. Now, if you're pulled over, a lot of times the police are taking your DNA samples without a warrant, and the courts have approved of that. So, I mean, they have our DNA, they have our fingerprints. When you're going to amusement parks and some things now, you have to use your fingerprints. I mean, you're giving up your fingerprints. Now, listen, a fingerprint used to be only given up to when you were charged with a crime. Now it's going into places of entertainment, stadiums to watch a football game. So we're in a total surveillance society. I think that one thing that I would encourage people to do is people are getting knocks on the doors late at night. The police are there banging on their door and sometimes smashing the door and rushing in. 80,000 SWAT team raids annually, up from 3,000 in the 1980s, where people are getting shot. Up to 500 dogs a day are shot by police, crashing through doors. Kids have been shot. People just for trying to protect their home, thinking burglars have come in their home, have been shot. But a lot of it's from social media. They're studying the social media and trying to predict and say, oh, this guy here, he says, I really like pot or something. If you say that word like that, they'll say, well, maybe he has marijuana in his home, which is a dangerous drug according to police, and not as dangerous as some of the pharmaceutical drugs that are harming people today. But obviously, they're crashing in through doors in the middle of the night. You can stop those things in your community. Do away with the grenade launchers your local police have, because they have an amazing amount of power to enforce things. And get these federal agencies out. If you have federal agencies that are working with local police, I'd say get them out of your community. I think the police should be warned about our safety as citizens. In fact, that's the way it used to be. We are the masters, they are our servants, but they don't see it that way anymore. And we need to reverse that in our local communities. But I'll tell you one thing. I've been doing this for over 40 years. It's very difficult to get people to act today because they are absolutely enthralled by their screen devices. And again, when the reason you had people like George Orwell writing 1984, or Aldous Huxley writing his book Brave New World, they saw people lined up at movie theaters and they saw them staring at screen devices and they went, whoa, this is like a drug. In fact, there have been studies to show that watching television is like a drug. It stops the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part of your brain, from operating. And it does. It just puts people into a passive mode. And not to be a conspiracy theorist, but there are those who argue that they're getting their head filled full of subliminal ideas and stuff. So the population can be controlled. When you have a population that's watching 150 hours of screen devices a month, you lose. I'd say with your children, by the way, you want things you can do, get your children, reduce their time on Facebook and things like that, because Facebook works with the government. Zuckerberg is meeting with the president secretly, on and off. Every president, basically, since Facebook's been in power, he's been in the White House eating dinner. We're not told why they're there or what they're doing, but there's definitely, and we talked about China. Google admits they work with China, and that's so scary when you think about that. It's all about money, and I've seen societies when they move in that direction, money, 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 and we'll take money over anything, we'll destroy our freedoms. That's not the way to go. Our basic ideas our kids should be taught, and you can teach them in the home. Teach them the Bill of Rights, teach them what the Founding Fathers are like, because they're not taught that anymore. Teach them freedom ideas and say, go outside and play, or let's go for a walk today. Just turn off the Instagram and all that stuff that you're doing, and just be real people, But it's going to be very, very difficult because we're in sort of a group. They've got us now at basically a group watch. And when Carl Bernstein of Bernstein and Woodward, who exposed Nixon and his dirty dealings, Bernstein started working with major media. He wrote a really good article, and I quote it in my books. He said it shocked him that the government was working with major newspapers, major media, vetting articles, sitting in their little studios and stuff like that. I mean, that's the situation we're in, folks. You may think you're not controlled, that you're an independent thinker, but if you're sitting and watching screen devices, you're not going to do much because you're just going to sit on your butt.
The surveillance that you're talking about is monitoring people to see if they're doing the right thing, the thing that was a desired outcome. How about the inputs that are being made to produce that outcome, the propaganda that's hidden or buried in ordinary media?
Oh, yeah, it's out there. I mean, when I'm surprised. I do not watch mainstream news. And the reason I don't watch CNN, Fox, or any of that stuff, because I learned a long time ago. I mean, I've been on many of those shows myself and was always surprised that when I was being interviewed by a former CIA agent or NSA agent or whatever, and you see them as the people now that they're commentators. And so it's controlling the media is really important. And it's out there. It's there. It's obvious if you just watch it and see who's doing the talking. And the thing is, by flipping from channel to channel, you will see they're all virtually saying the same thing all the time. And all the media that you're watching, by the way, is run by several major large corporate entities. Most people don't realize that Fox News and MSNBC are run by the same conglomerate. Now, can you think about this? From the left to the right is run by the same people making the money. So who was really controlling things here? It's all about money and power and control. And the government knew that from the beginning. We were warned by people like Dwight Eisenhower and others that said, be careful, watch out for the military-industrial complex. It will control everything you're doing, seeing, and drain you of your money and whatever. And so James Madison, who wrote the Bill of Rights, now I always love this quote, but he said basically this, and it's a quote: we ought to mistrust all those in power. People abuse power. They've abused it over and over and over. And we're never told the truth. We're not told the truth of history. I mean, how many people remember the McCarthy era? When I raised that with them, they look at me like, what was the McCarthy era? That was when the FBI was banging into people's doors and arresting people who wrote a letter supporting a cause. People like Ernest Hemingway, Frank Sinatra, and others are on that list. And that program got into power shortly after World War II, when, and again, this is all facts, Project Paperclip, several thousand top-rated Nazis came into this country, went into education, they went into the media, settled in this country, and NASA and groups like that, and became very, very powerful. And I think I look back on that and I always wonder what impact would that have on government when you have these kind of people coming into a power structure. And when you had the FBI, Herbert Hoover, watching everything everybody was doing. I mean, they were tracking the Beatle. John Lennon had a huge file. Martin Luther King had a monstrous file. Wherever he went, they watched him. So this has been going on a long time. And we, the people, have closed our eyes, have gone to sleep, and let it happen. And that's why it happens. That's why it always happens. When the people sleep, the monster grows. And when you have the Department of Homeland Security today doing threat assessments on all homes across America, they go from green to red. If you own a weapon, you got a red. And you can get a SWAT team raid. I mean, how often does the mainstream media report the SWAT team raids? They're happening 80,000 annually, and who's talking about it? No one's talking about it. I mean, it's to the point where if you believe those in power, you're very, very foolish. We ought to mistrust them. And that's where you raise the question, should I be allowing my children? And this is the key to the future. I had a guy, I was on a phone interview, radio interview on the phone, and a guy called in and asked a question, and he said, I don't have a question for John Whitehead. I just want to tell you, your pamphlet on the Bill of Rights works. I've been teaching my kids at home the Bill of Rights. And I tell people to do that. We have a pamphlet. Go to our website at rutherford.org, get a copy, teach your kids the Bill of Rights at home. We need a whole system of rebels, what I would call peaceful rebels, the kind that Martin Luther King called for. He was very wise, but he became such a big problem that he may have been killed by the government. That's what his family thinks. But the point is, there are people out here today that are speaking up. We should support them. Let's not get on the political correctness bandwagon and start erasing words and stuff like that, because once you do that, you're gone, throwing down statues or whatever we're doing. And Orwell said it best. He said, he who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the future controls the present. So we're seeing our words disappear. We're seeing historical monuments disappear, all because a certain class of people do not like them. And I'm a free speecher. I think we need to hear free speech. If someone is an idiot or we think they're an idiot, we need to say it historically. Historically, that guy was an idiot. But do we want to take down and rip away history so the kids today have no idea that the person was an idiot? So the question is, are we going to do those things? I'm just telling people, I'm going to speak out, you speak out, but if you can't, the federal government will not listen to you. That detailed study that Princeton University and Northwestern University did of all the policies passed in Washington, D.C. over 20 years, the professors came to the conclusion that we're ruled by an oligarchic elite of 585 billionaires who work with contractors. Some people call it the deep state. They run the government. And another study which came out of SMU a couple of years ago showed that psychopaths basically congregate in Washington, D.C. So we're ruled by people who don't care about us generally. They'll take our money. They'll overtax us. They'll inflate. They'll do this. They'll do that. And as we move into this digital realm now, we're looking more and more like data bits to these people. They can be deleted or erased. And that's what they're doing now. When you have Facebook bragging that they have artificial intelligence now doing the censoring and stuff like that, we're run by robots. And before we get off here, I want to make sure that people look up the term singularity and study that, because they're predicting by 2029, the human mind is going to merge with the internet. And we're going to basically all become robots. And this is what this metaverse thing is so dangerous. We're going to move into a virtual world where we won't know any truth at all. And our energy, money, will be totally controlled. There's a way to fight back against that at the local level, but people, you're going to get them off your butts and do it.
Another thing that people can do is do things in person it's always more convenient, it seems, to do things in the virtual world, whether that's paying for a purchase with a digital method or versus cash, whether it's using cell phones versus meeting someone face to face, whether there are various groups that are becoming more and more active around the country trying to get the word out, and they're doing it in many cases by actually holding seminars where they're holding talks where people get together and they talk together about what they're concerned about and share information of many different topics that are under pressure from official sources. So the flip side of the convenience of the virtual world is it is also vulnerable to being surveilled, number one, or being edited out, as you mentioned, number two. We've had dozens of social media platforms, independent journalists whose platforms were completely taken down off of large media websites, and some of them have been reinvented on alternative platforms. Can you talk to us about what your thoughts are about that? People voting with their feet and finding ways to not be subject to that kind of being deleted or being erased.
Reason we have a First Amendment, which allows us to petition the government for a redress of grievances to peacefully assemble, is because no government has ever wanted that. They want you to stay home and shut up and pay your taxes, and they'll pass their laws and control you. And that's why I emphasize free speech, freedom to associate, get out there, start civil liberties oversight committees in your neighborhood. And that means groups that get together and meet. You can start over phone calls, by the way, 10 people. And again, what the government fears most is that people will get together in a group peacefully, very peacefully, and petition the government. But here's a problem that I know, and it's a fact. The FBI has been notorious for infiltrating groups. So be careful when you're working with groups. If you have certain people in the group saying it's time to crash windows or do this, you may be talking to an agent from the government who wants you to get violent. Once you get violent, they love it. They send the police in, they crack your heads, and they say, look, these are idiots. And so be very, very careful is what I'm saying. If you're really effective, I will say this. You can get the police after you. I mean, people like Martin Luther King and others out there in the past who have stood up strongly have gotten shot or killed. And again, it may have been what the government says, but I doubt that. So the question is, remember this, fighting for freedom is not something that's going to be easy. Don't give up right away and stay peaceful. Peaceful assembly with the right kind of signs and whatever does have an impact, and it will affect local city councils. I mean, I've often said it. One person with a sign at a city council meeting is considered a weirdo. 3 people with the same sign is considered a movement, and they start going, oh, okay, are there any more out there? And because they want to stay in power. A lot of your local city councils, by the way, have outside corporations that control basically what's going on in your local community. People call and say, well, I can't believe they moved this big store in our community. Well, I said, of course you can believe it. The city council approved it, and it's destroying your little local community. That's because it's not really local. So get local people in there and keep the kind of people in there that will listen to you and fight for the Bill of Rights.
You mentioned also in your article about the paper mail. That's one of the avenues that some people think, well, I'll retreat to. I'll have my privacy because I'll just write someone a letter, and that way it'll be completely private. But you pointed out that even our mail has been photographed for years. Oh,
160 million letters, I mean, the post office is actually photographing everything now. They're opening some packages. So even the post office is part of the system. So whatever you're sending through the mail, whatever you're doing is being watched. I mean, and they admit that now. So it's, like I say, it's nothing you do is going to be private. I mean, if you're going to be a rebel, get ready to be a rebel. But I mean, rebels in the past, you go through the list of rebels that have been thrown, put in jail, whatever, it can be tough. Someone like a Julian Assange, by the way, who's put in a cage in the courtroom. I mean, we live in a world where the people in power generally can be very, very cruel. But I'll go back again. The United States does still have a Bill of Rights. And those Bill of Rights gives you a right to petition and fight the government, to own a weapon, to keep, the Third Amendment, keep militarized people out of your home. The Fourth Amendment, enforce it locally, folks. Make sure the police are getting a warrant before they go in through people's doors or whatever they're doing. And go down the list. I mean, it's all there. But in the public schools today, when I'm talking to even law students, they're not taught the Bill of Rights. They don't even know what's in them. So we live in a country that's just constitutionally ignorant. And I'm saying get constitutionally informed. Go to our website. We have a Constitution section on there. Read what the thing is about. And the people who started this government knew that. It was based on laws that of the past that they knew could work if the people would get together and fight for freedom. And that's the key.
Well, we're going to put two links in the description of this video. The first one is going to be to your most recent article. The article, You'd Better Watch Out, the Surveillance State Has a Naughty List and You're on It. It covers a lot of the things you have talked about and some more. We'll also put a link to the pamphlet on the Bill of Rights at the Rutherford Institute so people can avail themselves of that. We just are always grateful for your presence, John. You're a stand-up guy. You've been standing up for individuals and groups that have been affected by government overreach, and we appreciate your clear message and your clear-headed voice here on Liberty and Finance.
Same to you, sir. Thank you.
This is Dunnigan Kaiser, founder of Liberty and Finance. I'm now a licensed gold and silver broker for Miles Franklin. Call me directly for the physical gold and silver that you need at the best price with personalized private service from one of the oldest and best companies in the business. 31 years strong, A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, 0 complaints, licensed and bonded. For physical delivery, vault storage, or precious metals IRAs, excellent prices, privacy, and confidentiality. Pay by check, money order, ACH, bank wire, or Bitcoin. Satisfaction guaranteed. For fastest service, just call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 888-81-LIBERTY. And either I or one of my sons and fellow brokers will call you back as soon as we can and understand your needs.